This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, I'm the Blood Guy. Welcome back to another review of a film based on a real-life serial killer. And it's time for another pointless one. It's time for another rant. Which this is one that I've heard of. This is the first time I've seen it. This is not the first movie I've seen on these two guys. It's not even going to be the last one that I'll review. I think this is intended to be a fictionalized account, because I know this director had also done a Night Stalker film that's considered to be widely fictional. But there is enough here to make an actual film. I mean, it's one of those movies that takes place during a certain window or a certain aspect of this case, and there's enough to work with. I can see what they're trying to do, but they're trying to do like a fictional version of it, and because of that, it shifts a lot of the facts around in real life, which I don't really like. Like, with what they could have just said it in Washington when it actually took place instead of Los Angeles. But yeah, it's not a very good film. It came out in 2007, and it is Rampage: The Hillside Strangler Murders. Which, yeah, it looks like half Uwe Lamel film, looks like half sort of typical mid 2000s horror movie. And yes, that is Joe Dirt's girlfriend on the cover, so let that set the tone. Yeah, this is not the first film to be based on the Hillside Stranglers. There was a TV movie, The Case of the Hillside Stranglers, in 1989, actually with Billy Zane as Kenneth Bianchi, which I started watching that, but it was really late, and then Christmas came, and it kind of got away from me. I will go back to it, and I will review that. But the one from 2007 with C. Thomas Howell and Nicholas Turturro was actually really good. I was actually surprised by this one. This, to me, is like the essential Hillside Strangler movie. Now, of course, on Peacock, there's the 4-part documentary, which I have not checked out yet. But this, and yeah, it was directed by Chris Fisher, who did one of the Night Stalker films. I think the one he did was from 2002. Could be wrong on that. But even that, I think, is like a fictionalized account of Ramirez. But this focuses on the period when Kenneth Bianchi, one half of the Hillside Stranglers, was when he was initially arrested in Washington after killing 2 more young women, aside from the 10 that he killed with Buono in L.A. as the Hillside Stranglers. And he started to feign insanity and fake multiple personalities. And it was up to these psychiatrists to either prove or disprove these claims. That's what the movie's about. Which, that alone is interesting. I mean, Bianchi had just seen the TV movie with Sally Field called Sybil, a big movie about a woman with a ton of personalities. He was known to be above average intelligence. I'm not holding that up for that. Above average intelligence with an IQ of 116, studied psychology, just saw Sybil. And he actually tricked a lot of people. He convinced at least 2 psychiatrists. And then there was a doctor named Martin Orne who hypnotized him, but did like a trick hypnosis to prove that he was faking it. And that's what led to him agreeing to, confess to the Hillside Strangler murders and testify against Buono. There's a movie there. So I don't know why this went the route it did, because Brittany Daniels' character is fictionalized. And they're trying to do this thing where, she lives a troubled life, and then she kind of not really feels close to or drawn to Bianchi, but like takes on this case, and it's up to her to prove or disprove. And throughout the movie, she believes that he is suffering from these personalities, and it's up to her to disprove it. So I don't know why they had to fictionalize that. And what I meant by shifting everything around is because he did that after 12 victims, 10 with Buono as the stranglers, 2 on his own in Washington. This takes place after the 8th victim in LA. So not even all the Hillside Strangler victims have been killed yet. I don't know if it's like this alternate history or if just lack of research. I mean, I read that this was shot in 15 days. You can definitely tell. It feels like it was written in like a weekend. It's not a good movie. I mean, it's shot better than like say an Uwe Lamel film, but that's not saying much. The acting, I don't buy Brittany Daniel as a psychiatrist. I'm sorry, I don't. Clifton Collins Jr. I know I've seen him in other things, um, which it also stars Lake Bell, Michelle Borth, Tom Arena, and Clifton Collins Jr. Which Thomas Arena has done several films with Mikel Suave and Lamberto Bava. He was the lead in the Giallo film Body Puzzle by Lamberto Bava, which I really like. He plays Buono. He's in one scene. He's barely even a part of this film. It's essentially a Kenneth Bianchi movie, but even then, it only takes place during that certain window when he's trying to fake insanity. But yeah, Clifton Collins Jr., I know I've seen him in other things. Just give me a moment here. He was in Traffic. He was in Capote. Maybe not. I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of stuff he's been in. I just haven't seen a lot of them. Okay. Oh, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay, I did see that. A lot more TV. He was in a lot of TV in the 90s. 2002 revival of Twilight Zone. He was in the newer version of The Stand. And as Bianchi, he's definitely going over the top. He's going over the top with his personalities, whether he's Kenneth or whether he's Steve or whether he's uh, Billy. It's almost like they're going for like Primal Fear with Edward Norton. That's really how some of the scenes play out, but nowhere near as effective as Primal Fear. Pretty much all the names of all the other characters have been changed. They don't address any of the victims by name. They mix up a lot of the facts about the victims. Like, yes, it is widely known, pretty notorious, that one of their victims was injected with Windex when they were experimenting with means of torture. But here they say it was the 8th victim who was a prostitute, when when in reality it was their 6th victim who was actually an honor student. So they take some well-known facts, but they kind of just plug them in wherever they want. We only get to see one of the murders, which is the last one, the number 8. But I think it's just supposed to be set up as a typical kind of Hillside Strangler murder. One that's kind of depicting it as what they're known for, not really any specific one, but then they're taking specific facts from some of them. And like I said, Thomas Arena, who plays Buono, he has one scene. And the only people I buy in their parts were the 2 detectives. Oh, and Bianchi's lawyer, who, if you remember the guy with the high-pitched voice that helps out Punisher in the Thomas Jane version, he plays Bianchi's lawyer. But yeah, this movie's pretty pointless. I mean, it's only... where is it? It's only 85 minutes. There's not much to it. In fact, a good chunk of the film is just a lot of her life. Like, she lives with a drug dealer boyfriend who always comes home to him in bed with another woman. as long as she has, marijuana, she's fine. Sometimes she comes home and joins in, trying to. I thought it was gonna go like she has this troubled past, and Bianchi was gonna bring that out in her. Kind of like I thought it was gonna go similar to the route of Oxygen with Adrian Brody and what's her name, Tierney. Is it Maura Tierney or whatever her name is? I thought it was gonna have that kind of a relationship, not so much, and it doesn't even really get into all the facts or really much of anything around how or why he was able to feign his insanity and multiple personalities. Like, it doesn't mention the movie Sybil. It only hints that, okay, he's above average intelligence, and it says that he faked credentials to practice psychiatry, which he did do, but it doesn't really go into how well he knew psychology. It doesn't mention anything about Bianchi trying to be a police officer. So maybe knowing a little bit about interrogations or police work. And yeah, pretty much any kind of fact that they do state that's true about the murders or the victims. If they are true, they're just mixed up with someone else. And again, I don't understand why they had to move this whole thing with Bianchi from Washington, the Bellingham area of northern Washington, to L.A. I'm guessing just because they know Hillside Stranglers is in L.A., maybe they forgot his last two murders were in Washington. And yeah, there is a ninth victim, which it's presented that, Bianchi's able to leave. He's not really under arrest. He's just questioned while this whole thing with her is going on. Which, no, once he was arrested and started feigning his insanity, he was pretty much held. I don't think he was allowed to leave. But yeah, that's when a ninth victim ends up on her doorstep. And, she has to, she thinks the Hillside Strangler's messing with her, and he has to prove, like, no, it's Steve and Angelo. They know you've been talking to me. It's a sign from them. So there are 9 victims by the end of the movie. But one victim they use as a plot device for a fictional film. So there is no 10th victim, which means there's no 11th and 12th in Washington. Again, I don't know why they had to move it, but, these guys are pretty notorious. They're one of the biggest, I would definitely say they're the most notorious of the buddy killer category, which I've heard a lot of people sort of list them as the buddy killers along with sort of the ones that are leaders. The Hillside Stranglers, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. Those are buddy killers. Those are different than, say, Dean Corll and Elmer Wayne Henley and David Brooks, or Robert Gett and his Chicago Ripper crew. People that sort of are able to John Bunting in the Snowtown murders. These buddy killers are different than ones that are able to kind of get these people under their wing. And so those are not buddy killers. The first batch that I mentioned are. And these guys are probably the most notorious next to Lucas and Toole. But I would even say they're more notorious because the bulk of their murders were together as a team. Whereas Lucas and Toole were only together for a period, and then they branched off and did a bunch of stuff. But I would definitely say that they are among the most notorious of the 70s. Next to Ramirez, I would probably say the most notorious in L.A. Certainly of the 70s. Ramirez wouldn't come in until the 80s. But, like Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, Ramirez, you'll find them in every serial killer book. I decided not to bring in the big encyclopedias that I always have, but they're in all of those, and they're almost always listed together. You'll never see them have separate articles, but all these books, they're always listed together. They're in all of them, or they'll be listed if there's like categories in a book. It'll be a buddy serial killers. In fact, if you look on Wikipedia, there's 3 pages. There's Bianchi, Buono, and Hillside Stranglers. I don't have an actual book on them, but I did just order the Hillside Stranglers by Darcy O'Brien, which is considered to be like the definitive work on the Hillside Strangler murders. So these guys, there's definitely a lot to work with if you want to make a film. Hell, there's even a lot to work with just if you want to make a film on that one specific aspect. Kenneth Bianchi pretending to be insane. Hell, it doesn't even get into or mention like Veronica Compton, which was a woman Bianchi met, and then they conspired together while he was in prison, and then she was going to go out and commit this other murder with his semen that he helped smuggle out for her to make it look like the Strangler was still out there. It didn't work. This movie touches on a lot of that. Sure, it doesn't. I don't believe it touches on Bianchi trying to feign insanity, but this one is far more accurate. Covers more of the story of the Hillside Stranglers. Actually, does send Bianchi to Washington, where he kills 2 more women. So, I mean, even the angle that they're going for with this, it doesn't work. I mean, it gets some stuff right. The fact that his personality is Steve. When he realizes he's busted and tries to bring out a third personality named Billy. Okay, that's all there. But almost everything else, it pretty much just gets wrong. It's like someone read a book or saw a documentary on Hillside Stranglers 10 years ago and trying to make a movie based on that information from what they remember, writing it in like a weekend and shooting it in 15 days, which this was. I mean, there's not much to it. So I haven't finished the 1989 TV movie yet, but definitely just stick with this. I mean, this one's actually, for its low budget, it's decently shot and well acted. C. Thomas Howell and Nicholas Turturro do a really good job as Bianchi and Buono. Again, I didn't even pull up a picture of Thomas Arena in this because I couldn't find any. He's only in one scene. But I think I covered Clifton College Jr. But anyway, it's not a good movie. Even if you take everything based on a true story out of it, it's just not a good movie anyway. It's not shot well. It's not made well. It feels really rushed. It feels super rushed because it just ends. They realize he's faking, and then it just shows Brittany Daniel standing on her balcony looking at the beach, and it just ends. So it feels very rushed. Nothing interesting in how it's shot. No real intensity or anything at all. It's a really pointless film. It could have been this poorly made had the accuracy actually had something to it, but even that's where it ultimately fails. So, not a good movie. I would actually say skip right over this one and just stick with this. And check out the 4-part documentary on Peacock, Hillside Strangler, Devil in Disguise. I think it's more so based on Bianchi. But with that, I guess we'll get into the summary and the film itself. So as always, I like to give a brief summary on the killer that the film is based on. So the Hillside Stranglers are possibly the most notorious serial killers in the buddy killer category. Cousins Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono terrorized Los Angeles for 4 months from October of 77 to February of 78, in which 10 young women aged 12 to 28 were abducted, raped, tortured, killed, and dumped on the hillsides around the Los Angeles area. Most of which were prostitutes or runaways, but a few were actually honor students. The pair would pose as police officers, make false arrests, and usually take them back to Buono's car upholstery shop or his home. The women endured severe torture, in which one victim was even injected with Windex, and all were strangled. Buono was a violent sex addict with a history of violence and sexual assault, even against his own daughters from his numerous marriages, and called himself the Italian Stallion. Bianchi was an above average intelligent, clean cut man with a live in girlfriend and a child at the time of the murders, and applied numerous times to the police force in Rochester, New York, Los Angeles, and eventually Washington, where he moved to Bellingham in 1978 when the heat of the Strangler killings were getting too close. There he killed two more young women, and that's when he was finally caught. At first, he feigned insanity and to have multiple personalities, having just seen the TV film Sybil. When this didn't work, he finally agreed to testify against his cousin to spare himself the death penalty. The Hillside Strangler trial led to the longest trial up to that point, lasting between 1981 and 1983. Both were sentenced to life, but with Bianchi getting eligibility for parole. In 1980, Bianchi began a relationship with a woman named Veronica Compton, whom agreed to commit another murder staged to look like a hillside murder, complete with semen smuggled out to her. When this failed, she was also sentenced, but released in 2003. Angela Buono died in September 2002 of a heart attack at 67. Bianchi is still alive and serving in Walla Walla, Washington. And so now we get into the film itself, and thankfully, a lot of the scenes in this is just sort of pointless fictional stuff involving her and her personal life. So I didn't have to take as many notes. So hopefully this is not going to be as long. But it opens up saying Hollywood Hills, 1978. There's a house party with sex and drugs. That's where we see her and her boyfriend and the people they associate with. But then we see downtown, a prostitute is abducted off the street. It cuts to her naked, bound on the floor. Looks like it's in a garage, which most of the killings took place in Buono's car upholstery shop or his home. The two men take turns with her, and she's then injected with window cleaner and then strangled. It is known that their sixth victim, Christina Weckler, 20 years old, who was killed November 20th of 1978, was injected with Windex. But she wasn't a prostitute. She was actually an honor student. So, yeah, they're kind of mixing their facts. Or they're just creating sort of your typical hillside victim and then just taking known facts of others and then throwing it in there. I'm surprised they didn't have her yell, "You won't get away with this," when they're abducting her. Because I believe that was said by the eighth victim when she was abducted right in front of her house. So then we're officially introduced to Dr. Samantha Stone, who goes to the precinct and is briefed on Kenneth Bianchi. And she's tasked with eliciting a confession and to see if he's faking his insanity. Says he's 27, arrested for posing as an officer, lives with a girlfriend and a baby, which is all true. I'm trying to think of when he was actually arrested. I think in Washington, he was initially arrested because they were looking into the deaths of the two girls and saw they were killed at a house that was vacant but supposed to be house sat by Bianchi. And then that's when they looked into him. Though he was questioned in Los Angeles, he went on a few ride-alongs with cops, and he was questioned, and that's when Buono threatened to kill him if he did move to Washington. But this just says he was arrested for posing as an officer. They say 8 have been murdered so far, and the last was a 14-year-old. 14-year-old Sonia Johnson was actually the 6th victim, same day as 12-year-old Dolly Cepeda, which was November 13th of 78. Also, when he was arrested for faking insanity, it was for luring Karen Mandick, 22, and Diane Wilder, 21, to a house that he was sitting, which I just said. And that was on January 11th of 78. Uh, uh, 79, excuse me. I thought I had my notes wrong. In Washington after he moved there. They were the 11th and 12th victims. And the 14-year-old wasn't the one with the cleaning fluid in her veins, as the film says. Gets in the interrogation room where she meets Bianchi. He uses the term serial killer, which wasn't even a term yet. Yeah, that's a nitpick, but I put it anyway. Says he did kill those girls, but Steve did. When he did feign his multiple personalities, he did say a guy that Steve Walker was the one that did all the killings, supposedly unbeknownst to him. Says Steve wanted to get his car fixed at his cousin's, and that's when he saw a dead girl. They look into his cousin and see he's Angelo Buono with a history of rape and assault. True. They go to his house, but he can't be found until he assaults a detective that runs away. That I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. In fact, a good chunk of this movie is them looking for Angelo. It shows them looking at his house, his car upholstery shop. I think he was pretty easy to find, and I think he was arrested without incident. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But Bianchi goes to see Stone at her home. Of course, she's a fictional character, but I think once he was arrested, he was there for good. Especially once he started to act insane. He tells her Angelo had a bad past with women, even beating up his mother and calling her a whore, which is true. His mother was known to be doting, but they had a very tumultuous relationship. I don't know why I'm stuttering so bad. Which she actually passed away, I think, in January, February of 78, like right in the middle of the murders. And yeah, she called him names, he called her names, and at one point he did beat her up. Yeah, he had a long history of assault. Yeah. Samantha is informed that Bianchi posed as a psychiatrist, faking his diploma and credentials. It was a scam, way to meet women, which is true. He opened his own bogus practice when he first moved to LA in 76. He bought fake diplomas. He altered real transcripts, one of which was from a guy named Thomas Stephen Walker. And I think that is what helped law enforcement when they were looking into his past or just looking into him. They saw Steve Walker, and that's when they thought, okay, maybe he's bullshitting us. Samantha puts Bianchi under hypnosis. He was hypnotized by Dr. Martin Ord, but I think it was during his trial in 81. But it was during that time where Ord used this trick called the double hallucination, which is a person who's under hypnosis. Like if I were to say, oh, there's a chair right here, the person under hypnosis would see and think that there's a chair there, and that was the trap that Ord set, and that was how they finally caught Bianchi. This isn't that scene, but it does get there. So if I had just waited, I wouldn't have to explain that just now. And then there's a lot of scenes, like with her going home, finding her boyfriend in bed with another woman. At one point, he hands her a joint, and she just joins in. You get long scenes like that. But the next day, the woman he was in bed with is found dead outside her house. And it looks like at first it looks like her breasts were completely cut off. Then when it shows her in the autopsy room, it looks like just her nipples were bitten off. If we're going by the notion that there were 8 victims, this would be number 9. And the 9th victim was Kimberly Martin, who was a 20-year-old, killed December 14th of 77. She was found in an empty lot in Silver Lake. And there's no names or anything, not really any kind of detail about these characters to see if they are based on real ones. So, Angelo was picked up and interrogated. Says he moved a couple girls, which him and Bianchi did hold 2 girls captive and used them for sex trafficking just prior to them starting their spree. Calls himself the Italian Stallion, which was his self-appointed nickname. Test results show only one attacker on the last victim. Both killed all 10. Bianchi did kill alone until he moved to Washington. But then it gets into talking about secretor, non-secretor. It says that Bianchi was a non-secretor, which is true. Bianchi arrives at Sam's house, beaten up. It says it was Steve. He attacks her under another personality, saying it's Steve. It is arrested. At this point, Sam believes he has MPD, which I'm guessing she's just a composite character based on the two psychiatrists he did trick and Martin Orr, who was the one that debunked the whole thing. Steve goes into details, because now it's an interrogation and she's gonna try to bust him, of the killings, such as injection of cleaning fluid and rectal bleeding, all facts that were stated earlier in the film. Then she asks him about the first, the hooker with the silver necklace. Yolanda Washington was a hooker. She was their first victim on October 17th of 77. I never found anything about a silver necklace. And she does do that trick where she says there's a chair there. But then at one point, another personality comes out. I don't know if he's supposed to be like mentally challenged or like a young boy, but he says his name is Billy, which is true. When Bianchi realized he was caught, or that he had to come up with something else, he came up with this third personality named Billy. That's when she brings Kenneth back out. She tells him he failed. She explains to the detectives and the DA, I guess, how he failed. And then it just shows her on the balcony looking at the beach, and it ends. So yeah, very, very rushed. It doesn't even show the arc. It's just she automatically believes he has MPD, and then out of nowhere she believes he's faking. So you can definitely tell it's rushed. You can definitely tell it was shot in 15 days. There's not much to this film. There are little chunks or lines of dialogue that are truthful, that are factual. But the overall film itself, it's not as wildly inaccurate as, say, an Uwe Lamel film. It is better than that, but it's still pretty pointless. I mean, I don't know if they just set it in Los Angeles because, every time they read about Hillside Strangler, they just think 1970s Los Angeles. Or if they just completely forgot about Washington. Or if they just, wanted him to be with Angela Buono. Which even that doesn't make sense because Buono is in one scene. One quick scene. So you could have cut Buono right out of this film and it would have mattered. So they could have set the whole thing in Washington, which I believe is when all of this took place. Or at least, open it up in Washington and then send him to LA. At least try to make it not a good movie at all. Again, if you're going to watch a Hillside Strangler movie, definitely just watch this one from 2004. Miles better, both in filmmaking, acting, also just in historical accuracy, and just getting more of the story in there. So, I mean, there was definitely enough to work with if you wanted to make a movie about Bianchi's attempt to trick everybody. This just did it in a completely wrong way. And yeah, just knowing that Joe Dirt's girlfriend is the lead and a psychiatrist sent in to, prove or disprove this guy, it really doesn't work. It just reeks of mid-2000s, low-budget awfulness. So, yeah, just stick with this movie. I do have a few more serial killer films to get to, a few more documentaries coming, and more. I have more documentaries, more are coming. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.